So the title of the talk today is based upon the new book. It's called Earth Grids, The Secret Patterns of Gaia's Sacred Sites. And I published this book last year, and some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today is from this book, which is obviously available today. And there's some other new bits of research as well, just so we can get some idea of the significance of how the ancients were working all around the planet, and how they seem to have unlocked a very interesting earth energy system. All over the planet. So there seems to be a sort of globalization happening in prehistoric times, as well as still being worked with today. So some of the subjects we're going to look at include these, because initially, in the first point on this slide, what got me into this subject was actually interacting with some indigo children, or psychic children. And this was at a conference I went to in Hawaii in 2003. And they were doing some work on what they kept calling the planetary grid, and they were going to work on a grid point on the big island of Hawaii. I got involved in these certain ceremonies and ended up getting very influenced by what they were doing. And this kind of opened up the door to research the planetary grid. I was already into earth energies. I'd read Hamish's and Paul's book, The Sun and the Serpent, so I had an understanding of earth mysteries. But as when I worked with these kids, it really opened things up, because they believed it wasn't just humans working with the grid. They said there's off-planet beings as well as the dolphins and the whales. When you think about it, most of the world is water anyway, so you can understand that someone has to work with these kind of energies under the water. So we're going to look at the interplanetary connection and the 19.5 degree enigma, global earth energies, and obviously this connects with ley lines as well, and the unified vector geometry projections, UFOs, and other global networks. Sacred geometry and the platonic solids, that always comes into this subject. You have to adhere to this when you're dealing with any spherical geometry. And the far side of the grid, there's some very unusual things that have been going on that are connected. And it seems like even some government agencies around the planet are working with these energies too. And then finishing off with new grids, new ideas, and connecting to it as well. Because this is very much a fountain sort of philosophy, is actually to send out good vibrations through the planet and to other groups of people. But first of all, I would like to dedicate this talk, really, and all my research and everything I'm involved with, to the late great John Michell, who was a huge inspiration for me. And I'm sure many of you have seen him speak at various fountain conferences and other things. But he was very much part of Megalithomania, which is the conference I'm involved with, and he supported us and helped us get that off the ground. And it's this quote here from the view over Atlantis, which really intrigued me and inspired me, and kind of made me really think about this whole idea of a global ancient system that was in place and it was being used effectively. I'll just read this quote out because I think it's very important to sort of grasp this. A great scientific instrument lies sprawled over the entire surface of the globe. At some period, perhaps it was over 4,000 years ago, almost every corner of the world was visited by a group of men who came with a particular task to accomplish. With the help of some remarkable power by which they could cut and raise enormous blocks of stone, these men erected vast astronomical instruments, circles of erect pillars, pyramids, underground tunnels, cyclopean alignments whose course from horizon to horizon was marked by stones, mounds and earthworks. The vast scale of prehistoric engineering is not yet generally recognized. And those are the words of John Michell from The View Over Atlantis, and that was from 1969. But there are other ancient connections with the grid as well. Particularly, there's this Hopi prophecy, or Hopi creation myth rather, which gives another clue to the grid. And this image you can see here is a beautiful graphic that my brother put together for my book, and it shows great the spider grandmother woman, who the story goes that she spat into 2 handfuls of earth and she created 2 brothers. These brothers sat in meditation to link minds. One went to the North Pole, where he began to work his magic, and the other one went to the South Pole to say prayers, and they heard a distant drum of Taiwa, or the Creator, to send vibration and a surge of life force to the crystal at the center of the earth. and this created some vibrational frequency which popped out from the crystal and went all over the surface of the Earth into power spots or sacred centers all over the surface, which some traditions call spots of the fall. Some of you may have heard of this. And so this tradition goes way back into the creation myths and stories of the Hopi, and even the Druids talked about 12 great circles that go around the planet. And there are other similar Native American myths too, which kind of support this. But I want to jump off planet for a moment and visit Mars to start with. And this is particularly interesting because some of you may recognize the 3D image up there as a kind of Merkaba or a star tetrahedron. And this is the work of Richard Hoagland, who initially became very interested in the whole Mars phenomenon when he saw some NASA photographs and saw what he thought was a pyramid complex and also a face on Mars, which you can see in the lower graphic there. But he kept finding all these certain angles and geometries on the planet. One of them was 19.5 degrees, or more precisely 19.47. And when you place a tetrahedron in a sphere, you get the points touch the surface at 19.5 degrees above or below the equator. And this is where sunspots sort of cycles and sort of sunspot activity is at its most strongest on the sun. On Earth we have Hawaii, which is the most active volcano on this planet. And also on Mars we have the Olympus Mons volcano complex, which is the biggest in the solar system. So there seems to be some kind of activity happening at 19.5 degrees. And this gives a really interesting indication of a potential grid system that happens within all planetary bodies. And this graphic here, you can see on the top right, the sun. This shows you the most intense kind of solar flare activity you get on the sun, and it all happens at precisely 19.47 degrees. So we can see these kind of energy upwellings through different bodies within the solar system. And on the lower map, you can just see where the 19.5 degree latitude is marked. But there are other interesting geometries on other planets too, and moons especially. Now this one really intrigued me, because you can just see very clearly on Miranda, Uranus's moon, you can see in the top 3 photographs pentagonal and hexagonal geometries forming actually on the surface of the moon itself. And in the bottom 2 pictures you can see triangular images, which would be potentially faces of an icosahedron. And on Saturn itself we have this great hexagon in the North Pole, and you can see that on the top left photo quite clearly. And this was actually a NASA photograph taken in 1981, and it wasn't really talked about properly until just a few years ago. But the size of that hexagon is the width of 2 Earths. It's that big. And for some reason, and no one can explain this, no astronomers or anyone can explain this, it seems to maintain its integrity. It doesn't budge, even though there's massive swirling cloud bands and plasma moving around the North Pole. And somehow some energy system or vibration, or possibly a cymatic vibration, holds that energy in place while everything else moves around it. So again, we're seeing on other planets in our solar system very interesting geometries that are naturally there, which aren't talked about by NASA or anyone else. On Iapetus, which is one of Saturn's moons, all the way around the dead center of the planet is a great wall which is 12 miles high and 12 miles wide, and no one has any idea how that formed because it doesn't spin on that particular axis, and there's nothing that could actually make that is known about in astrophysics or any other kind of study. So again, we find all these anomalies throughout the solar system, but to me, finding these on other planets suggests potentially that then why not have these on Earth as well? Why not have energetic geometries forming within the planet and potentially Earth grids? Even Plato gave us a clue about it as well. He suggested or mentioned the dodecahedron without mentioning the name dodecahedron, because in ancient times if you mentioned that word you could get in big trouble, potentially killed as well. And one of his paraphrased quotes, "The Earth when viewed from above resembles a ball sewn from 12 pieces of skin." Now this would resemble a dodecahedron, which is the shape you can see on the right hand side, which is actually a stone sphere that was discovered in northern Scotland in a perfect geometric configuration of a dodecahedron. And if you look on the image on the left, this is one of the